Okay.
Start a wish list.
Everybody can hear me okay? Awesome. This is so exciting, you guys. First of all, to have us all here. I'm going to do a few introductions, do a couple of housekeeping items, and then I'm going to pass the mic to some of my expert helping oversight and planning committees. So very much welcome. My name is Crystal Campbell. For those who haven't met me, I am the Director of Operations here at UT Southwestern Simulation Center, and I'm also on the Planning and Oversight Committee. I have to say, my team told me yesterday, this is the first time in 25 months we've had this whole room open. So, woohoo! And we all know COVID has been a challenge, and it gives me goosebumps to see us all here and able to collaborate again. I also know a lot of you guys have taken the brunt and been innovative and had to overcome and persevere through a lot of challenges with COVID. We felt it. I know many other centers have. So I think we all deserve a round of applause for where we are and how great we've all done. So. In saying that, we have a really exciting morning planned for you today. I will not talk that long, but I just want to make sure you kind of know where some things are in the UT Southwestern home that we'll call it our home for you today. All of our team has blue polos on or black polos, and they are going to be resources. So if you need a question, you don't know where the restrooms are, please tap them. They're amazing and they'll help you get what you need. Yep, and they're raising their hands. They're welcome to just kind of look around. They're great people. Additionally, as we will be staying mostly in here this morning, we'll have our presenters presenting from these big monitors. We are recording. We have quite a few people on Zoom. So hi, Zoom people too. We're excited to have you joining virtually. The bathrooms are down this hallway. And then once you get past the double doors to the left, and then once we leave today, the parking ramp should be up, but we'll make sure about 11:30, 11:45 that it is. If not, we'll give you a parking pass. So we'll make sure you're taking care of that. Before I kind of have Brian come up and we'll get started, does anybody have questions that they need to ask right now? No? Okay, there's lots of coffee and water right outside too. And I'm really excited to get to know a lot of you today that I might not have met before. So again, welcome, welcome. We're so excited to have you.
Well, good morning in person.
Morning.
You're in person. Act like you're excited about being in person. Come on. So do yourself a favor. I show you who I am, right? Show me who you are. Okay, now put your mask back on so we follow the rules. Hey, welcome to our first Lunch and Learn that we're back in person. This is fantastic. We have a couple of fantastic speakers lined up for you, but before I get to them, let me use a mouse and click. Maybe. There we go. This is the agenda. Got that. So here's the agenda for the day, and hopefully you can see it. I had to make it kind of small. Thank you to Erica for putting all this together, the agenda, because it's beautiful. At 10:30, we'll be hearing from Bryce, and I'll tell you about him momentarily. We'll have a lunch transfer of speakers at 11 o'clock, and then Kelly Rossler. I hope I said that, Kelly, right? So Kelly's easy. The Rossler part, I don't want to mess that up, but. So anyway, we'll hear from Kelly as well, and then we'll have some more time to visit. And then this afternoon, near the end, we're going to have a in-person, not virtual tour as well. There we go. Now, just to introduce you to SPOT. Who are we? What are we? SPOT stands for Simulation Professionals of Texas. And we've been around for several years now. It's a professional organization that offers education, obviously, like this today. So collaboration and networking, whether you're online or here in person. And again, welcome to those folks that are online. We have 3 advisory board members. Michelle Artigo actually lives and works in Indiana, Evansville, Indiana. Jeremiah Averana is one of the founders of SPOT, and he teaches, I can't think of where. So that's right, Everman. He teaches in Everman. And then Karen Meadows is at UT Southwestern. And then we have a planning oversight committee, and several of us, actually all of us are here. So if you'll just raise your hand, y'all, or stand up. Erica Hinojosa is in the back. So she's at UTA. I'm on the planning oversight committee. I'm at Texas Wesleyan University. I'm the director of simulation there. Laura Tilke is over here in the left-hand corner. She's the director of simulation at TCU. Crystal, who you've met this morning. So she injured her back. So that's why she's not getting out of her chair. So that's why we have a chair for her. And then Ruben Torres, who's at South College in McAllen. So we have a great group, and this is the group that helps plan these meetings so that everybody can come and be in person. Okay, go ahead, Crystal, will you hit that slide for me? Maybe. So where is Spot going? Well, we're on our way to being an official nonprofit organization. And one of our advisory board members was going to try to be here to explain this to you, but she had something come up and she's not able to. She asked that I just share with you that we've received the ID number. So we're moving along in the process to become a nonprofit. We've received the ID number from the Texas Comptroller's Office, and the final steps are taking place to register as a nonprofit organization. So this has been in the works for a long time as well, and we're getting there. So it's just, it is, and one of the things that helps us get there is our GoFundMe account. And the GoFundMe account, you're welcome to contribute, or you're welcome not to. We'd love it if you'd contribute. If everybody in this room contributed $5, that'd be a whole big difference, make a huge difference. And so there's a QR code down here on the right-hand side of the slides. And I'm not gonna badger you into contributing, but so far, we've raised about $650. All of this is used to work on becoming a nonprofit because the fees for that are pretty extensive. And I won't go into great detail about it, but just so you know that goes to a secure account. And once again, that's all used just to be able to move us toward becoming a nonprofit organization. Okay. If you want to keep up with what's going on with Spot, we do have an email that's at the top there. We also have a website that's there on the second line, and then join on Facebook. You get some updates on Facebook. We don't harass anybody by any means. We send out information. We send out information about the meetings, upcoming meetings, that kind of thing. So that way you can know what's going on and plan for the future. You'll be able to plan for our next meeting, for instance, by just keeping up with what's going on the website, what's going on with our Facebook page and LinkedIn as well. Now, what happened there? Well, he is from California, so maybe you know what that is. And it's green. Anyway, we are absolutely very fortunate, blessed to have Bryce Armstrong with us. He has sponsored our lunch for today, coming from Jason's Deli, and we will have lunch. Will it be in here, Crystal?
Yeah,
okay.
In the classroom, I didn't mention that, right down the hall, but you can get your lunch, come back in here, or move around for just a moment. We won't have that much time, so we'll have to start back in.
Right. You'll probably have about 10 minutes to pick up your lunch and then come back in here and then join us back for Kelly's presentation. So anyway, and sorry, Zoom folks, you won't have lunch provided by us, by Bryce, but you know, maybe you can get a sandwich at home since we're having Jason's Deli. So anyway, so Bryce is going to speak with us about his company, which is WorldViz VR. Did I say that right? WorldViz VR. And then after that, we'll have a presentation from Kelly Rossler as well. And Kelly is from Baylor, and we'll introduce her properly right after lunch. Okay, Bryce, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Hello. Is that working? Mic still works? Okay, good. All right. Now I can switch over to the, I think so. As long as I can. Oh, actually, I don't have it. Oh, there we go. All right, you got it. That's me. And then the slideshow. Oh, that's okay. Yep. Good. Perfect. Woohoo. All right, so it's great to be introduced with a bit of making fun of me at the same time. Drawing on my face. Thanks, Brian. So I'm with WorldViz. So thank you for having me here. This is fantastic. It's my first in-person presentation in 2 years also, so forgive any sloppiness there. I'm definitely more comfortable with a one-on-one conversation about the solutions we provide. So please feel free to jump in with questions. That's going to help keep me on track. Otherwise, the rambling could start and I could go over. So do we want to admit somebody? I don't know. Got it. Okay. I think this will advance me. So yeah, so the first thing that I wanted to start with, and these can just be rhetorical questions. We can start with one raise of hands. How many of you have experienced an immersive training space? Okay, good. So a portion of you have. That's great. That's a great base for the rest of the conversation. This can go in so many different directions since WorldViz has a lot of experience in VR in general, but today I'm focusing on a product called Prism, which is an immersive training environment. But some questions just to keep in mind as we go through the slides are, do you feel like you're limited in the space or the equipment that you have, that you currently have locally? Is there any limitations that you can think of that the technology we're going to talk about might help overcome? How do you feel about VR technology and simulation? Do you have any bias already? Is there something that you think, an aversion to VR, any immersion, or are you, receptive to the idea of incorporating that type of technology into your sim center? And then are you aware of any good examples in VR? And so I'm not just talking about WorldViz products or solutions, but VR in general, immersion in general. Are you aware of any good solutions? Have you incorporated already? I'd like to hear about those if we have time at the end, just so I can have a sense of what's working for you, because we are an adaptive company and dynamic in that we can kind of shift and pivot and incorporate different types of technology into our own solutions. So please think about those things kind of as we go through. And just to kind of give a first impression, I'm going to talk over this video that hopefully is muted, and I'll check that. Well, it is good. That can give an impression of kind of what an immersive training room looks like. So these would be otherwise white walls, and as the subject is walking around, touching the walls, it's changing the environment, right? So we are taking this user to a location that they are not. And at its core, that's kind of the technology that we're going to be talking about is it a convincing way of presenting a background or a context for whatever types of training? I mean, in this case, we're just using visually appealing environments, right? We just want to get across the sense of immersion. What is immersion and how does it feel to be immersed, right? And the answer, hopefully for those of you who have experienced in any immersive environment, is that it within a couple seconds does the job of what, say, a good movie would do in the course of 10 or 20 minutes, or a good book in the course of an hour, right? It takes a while, and then you get wrapped up into that environment. And hopefully an immersive environment takes you there quickly so that you can focus on whatever the procedure, intervention, task at hand might be with an environment that's convincing enough to have to supplement with feelings of stress or support or whatever that environment is intended to deliver. So these are just some fun environments, right? And part of the reason to show you these is that truly you can capture an environment anywhere, because the tool to capture the environment is a 360-degree camera. So it's just this tiny camera. You can either hold it on a selfie stick or put it on a tripod. Take it into any environment that you're interested in, anything that you want to replicate in a virtual environment, if it's a clinical site, a pre-hospital site, truly anywhere, or a relaxation room and you want to do a beach in the Bahamas, go for it. Capture the scene, bring it into your room, and now you can easily and quickly create that environment for you to train within. Advance. All right, so who is WorldViz? Let's take a step back here. We are not a clinical company, we are a technology company, right? So we use immersive technology to enhance the way people create, learn, and collaborate. And as I mentioned on the outset, we are not strictly a projection-based company. We do virtual reality solutions and headsets, and all sorts of different applications for all different industries. So healthcare is a focus right now. So WorldViz is a pioneer in simulation. We've been around for 20 plus years at this point with roots in a collaboration between MIT and UC Santa Barbara, where our original software Vizard was developed and used mostly in psychology experiments, so research applications, where setting controls is a priority, right? Being able to replicate and a scene and pull out data on the back end meant extreme levels of control on the front end, and that's how VR had some early roots in psychology. And I feel like there's some parallels there with what's happening in medicine right now and the ability to kind of draw data on the back end of any type of training that you provide. So with that 20-year history means we've been around for probably longer than any other or most other simulation or VR companies that you might come across, which is, but there are a lot popping up right now because of consumer devices, right? Consumer available head-mounted displays or goggles, right? These types of things are now lower in cost and accessible. And you see all sorts of companies popping up that are providing different types of training applications. So I'm interested to kind of hear how those are working for you guys in a bit. Who am I? My introduction to simulation and virtual reality was with WorldViz right out of college. So it was one of the first jobs I got. And I worked there for about 5 years, and we did a lot of national and international installations, mostly in engineering and psychology departments, working on research applications and training applications in those areas. And it was a great introduction because I got my hands on all sorts of technology and installed and worked with all different types of clinical applications and research applications and ergonomic studies and really cool stuff. And from there, I kind of took a turn into medical simulation for about 10 years. So I was with a company that did ultrasound education and training, and then with a mannequin provider. And I kind of got my feet wet in medical simulation, what that's all about, how healthcare simulation works, working with the residency programs and EMS programs and nursing programs and kind of every different aspect of that, from civilian to military, VA, national and international. Kind of have a good overview of what's happening in simulation and healthcare kind of all over the world. And then I rejoined WorldViz because it clicked to me that I had been with a company that had really strong expertise in technology. And then I had been introduced to an industry that seems to be evolving these technologies to fit into healthcare. And I wanted to see if there was a way of improving upon concepts that I'd seen play out at other companies and in other applications. So that brought me back to WorldViz to kind of grow this Prism concept and see what we can do. So Prism is an enhanced immersive simulation theater. It's difficult to show you outside of a Prism theater how it's enhanced, but the idea is you're not just capturing images and videos from the real world, but you're able to then enhance those media by adding support information, adding touch triggers that can pull up additional media files, videos, sounds, instructional guidelines that are in a support document, whatever you want. You can keep certain elements of education within the training environment. So if a good example might be that you are in the middle of some type of a clinical simulation, and something's going terribly wrong, and rather than kind of pack up and head back to a classroom, you could have an embedded trigger because you predicted that something like this might happen early in the education of a particular task. Click the embedded trigger and watch an expert go through that procedure in real time, and then resume your simulation with a little bit more information, right? Or if you forget the steps to a particular procedure, you can pull those up and have access to that while you're in the middle of a particular simulation. So that's those are certain ways of enhancing, and you can take this in any direction you want, since a touch embedded trigger can pull up any media file you choose. Truly, you can come up with creative ways of using that. And then it's an immersive simulation theater. The immersion component, hopefully, get a little bit from the video. And if we have a chance during lunch or after, I have a virtual reality goggle set up in the back where I can give you an experience of what it's like to be in a Prism theater with those wraparound walls, show you what that feels like. So the goal overall is to evoke a sense of presence in simulation scenarios. And I know that likely this group does a lot of work around that already, creating spaces in your facilities that reflect the real clinical or pre-hospital spaces. And so And I believe that the reason you're doing that is to evoke that sense of presence and have those tools available in one form or another. So that's what Prism aims to do. And it is, from kind of a what's delivered standpoint, it is a turnkey hardware and software solution. So it's just a plug and play. It's interactive in its use, both through hand controls or touch controls, and also through a control tablet that a control room operator can use. Excuse me. It's dynamic in that your creation of content is fluid, right? Like anybody can do it. Anybody in this room, I have confidence, if you can move a file from one folder to another, you can create content within the Prism authoring tool. And it's built with analytics for debrief. And I understand the community is very focused on kind of an evaluation of performance in these environments. And I realize there's a host of tools. I know that even in this room, you've got PTZ cameras everywhere that are capturing simulation as it's performed, and then being able to reflect on how a particular student went through their training. The product offers the ability to add performance markers so that you can kind of contribute to that debrief, and that's just embedded. So for your use cases. No, it's not gonna work. Gotta hit play. So here, this is an installation where I was just testing controls. And so you can see it's as a 360 image. You can rotate how that room is oriented within these three walls. It's a really wide angle, which is really a fisheye perspective. And now we're seeing just, sorry, let me turn off the, okay. So I'm doing some light adjustments. There's ambient lighting that you can play with. This is the control tablet. So an instructor will have this accessible during a simulation and be able to turn on or off any embedded sounds, or pull up different triggers that can be embedded on the screen. And you can have icons that show where these are placed, or you can make them visible in just a simple wall touch will pull up this type of information. And here showing that you can activate the same content through wall touch. So this is a little bit more clinically relevant content where you have, in this case, it was an urgent care patient room and an urgent care waiting room that I just took the 360 camera, walked in, placed it down, and within a couple of minutes, you've got all the, this content that you can work from. So the value that Prism can bring to an institution is setting up a multi-purpose training room where you now have, one room dedicated to, it could be the low volume simulations that you run, so you can't dedicate a full room to it. So if you have a hard time justifying the facilities improvements that would offer you, the perfect OR training site. I know in this institution particularly, I got to see they've got a fantastic one. So that's great. You probably wouldn't use Prism to recreate something that you can recreate by throwing real devices in the room. But maybe there are simulations that are run less often, or you have the opportunity to do interprofessional education with a local partner, and you want to do the scene of an accident, and then a patient transfer to an ambulance, and then a transfer to an ER to an OR, right? How do you manage those transitions unless you've got all of the equipment, the time, the space, and the facilities built out? Well, you can do that in Prism with a click of a button, right? You can go from the scene of an accident where you have very few props, maybe just a bicycle laying on the side of a road, and then you essentially move that out of the way, wheel somebody out of the room, come back in, and now you're in the back of an ambulance. And then take it back out, click of a button, now you're in an ER loading dock. So you can kind of recreate that flow and then work in your local partners who would participate in simulation. So that's a fun way of creating a multi-purpose space. And then beyond the Prism applications or the scenario applications, you're left with an empty room, right? You turn the lights on, turn the projectors off, and you've got a blank room. So throw some desks and chairs in there, and you've got an additional classroom. So it doesn't take up any real facility space other than whatever you're using for. It's cost effective, kind of to the same points that I just spoke to. You can, instead of having to buy all of the furnishings of a particular room that may be less frequently used, you can just project those and not just images, right? So this could be, there could be movement. You can actually put some production value behind your scenes and create full scenarios where, a mother or father is crying because their child was hurt on the playground and has a broken arm, right? And you can then kind of create and then replicate that scenario as many times as you want. And then you can scaffold curriculum by building in support information, or you can complicate a scenario by building in hazards or distractions, a dog barking or a siren going off, right? Stressors that increase or change kind of the cognitive load of the participant or the learner. And then ease of use. As I mentioned, anybody in this room can create content in Prism. It's not limited to computer programmers to be able to get this thing off the ground. And that is kind of a critical piece in the development and the effort we've put into the authoring platform. For the instructor, the ability to standardize and kind of scaffold and replicate scenarios offers you more control in providing kind of a continuous education cohort after cohort. Localizing content, I think, is a really big concept that that deserves a mention for sure. If you're training a particular user population or learner group in a local community, exposing them to the local community could be a real value add. A good example could be, if you had limited OR access in the hospital where you do clinical rotations, or if it were a nursing program, for example, that didn't have, that they want OR nurses with experience, but they don't give OR nurses access to the OR. You could recreate the OR in a Prism room, do an orientation where you talk about which paths you can take walking around a room, where things are located, and improve their ability to function in that space ahead of getting some clinical time in an actual OR. Uh-oh. Can I enable? Okay. And then again, the creation. What we would never want to do is give an instructor additional tasks that are super, cumbersome. So the idea that this is easy to create content really allows instructors to create and share. I should have had create and share, because an organization like SPOT, if interested in an idea or a solution like Prism, would be able to host a marketplace for you to share content, since you'd be able to upload and download content that's created at one facility to share with another facility. It's very simple to create, improve, share, edit, make it work for you. And then through that process, an organization can kind of zero in on what the evidence-based content is that they want to use for training. So iterating on your content is very easy, and that's a real value add for instructors. And then for learners, it's very clear, the immersion, the engagement, and the exposure to potentially hazardous conditions, right? Side of a highway, you can't take your group of learners, if they're an EMS cohort, to the side of a highway or the edge of a cliff, right? So creating these conditions that are either difficult to replicate or hazardous conditions that you couldn't actually physically justify taking a group of learners to, or for exposure, right? So for exposure to conditions that are just difficult to come by. Or you have this one opportunity to capture a really special scene, and you can then do that and then bring it to your group of learners. So here's an attempt that we made at kind of putting this into a graph and kind of the why behind Prism. And if I fumble with this a little bit, just be patient with me. I'm trying to learn how to talk through this graph that I think can be powerful if used in the right way. So if we think about traditional educational methods for medical education, and you have part task trainers as an example of really low realism, because you practice on task trainers in a very sterile environment, but high environmental control, right? High contextual control. You can replicate what that task trainer is supposed to do over and over again. And on the other far end of that spectrum, clinical rotations take residents into hospitals working with real patients, right? So that's fantastic. And it's very real. But the problem is that one class to the next doesn't get the same experience. You may have a very severe case of something that it has a high impact on one group of learners, and then not be able to replicate that with the next class. And I think that scenario training as a whole really tries to merge the cognitive and skills training with the realism of what you get out of clinical rotations. And that, I think, is the goal of scenario training. So it kind of pushes the curve in the right direction. And what I'm proposing is that virtual options, be it Prism or otherwise, really try to push that even further, right? Because they offer more contextual control, because you have literally the same virtual backdrop every single time, right? You can kind of zero in on what the most effective background would be. And realism, in terms of localized content that we talked about, in terms of photorealistic content that we talked that you're capturing, you're pushing realism in a direction as well. So the goal here is, while control and realism may have been at odds in traditional methods of medical education, I think that virtual reality offers kind of the best of both of those worlds in a controlled training environment. So here's just one more clip within our theater showing a little bit of kind of more, well, actually I don't remember what this one shows. We're not more clinical content, right? So showing, bringing up some instructions or types of mask protocol in that case, or a particular patient profile during check-in. You can just think of how you might use this. Maybe add the sounds of a waiting room, beeps going off, whatever it is. You could have whatever's happening behind these curtains. You can add surround sounds. You can bring in more life to the environment and embedded information about kind of what's happening here. And that's kind of the goal. Again, I just wanted you to have one more impression of what a room would feel like if set up with Prism. So let's move to the next slide. Yeah, so common uses as a background. And I want to stress one more time that Prism as a background implies something's happening in the foreground. So it is unusual. It's difficult because it's kind of a mixed message. I'm saying, hey, look at this. It's Prism. But I'm also saying, don't look at this, because what you're really focusing on is what's happening in the room, right? You have a task at hand, and what Prism is intended to provide is what's happening around you that's increasing stressors or distractions while you're focusing on a task. So while I'm saying look at Prism, I'm also saying remember that it's a background. And that could be for demonstration, scenario training, skills evaluation, what have you. As a presentation tool, it's like PowerPoint on steroids. I mean, it's a fantastic room that you can add presentation material to. I love doing presentations of Prism within Prism because you can touch walls and kind of advance through things. And as a debrief room, we're exploring how this can be really effective to bring people back into the scene and then use the embedded triggers to give a debrief of how it's being used. So thank you. I know I'm probably right at or over time, and I want to make sure that I leave time for questions. And so we'll revisit some of the questions that I started with about how you feel about your existing space, how you feel about VR technology and simulation in general, if you're aware of any good examples of VR and immersive technology. And then through the questions I've added are common use cases that come to mind for your institutions, and any other questions about Prism. And if I have run out of time and I didn't actually track very well here, if you want a presentation for your institution, I'm happy to do an online or on-site kind of demo of what that looks like. And again, I'll be giving some demos in the back. So that's it from me.
If you have questions, I have the microphone. I can come to you.
Yes.
Hi, Bryce. Thank you so much for the presentation.
Thank you.
So my question to you is usability of the actual software and the hardware. My dissertation was in VR. I've done a lot of work around VR, and what I found is from the software manufacturer to the actual, like if you're getting a Vive or you're getting the Oculus, it appears that they don't talk to each other. So my perception is I have an Oculus at home because I use it to play with zombies.
Okay.
So, but what I'm wanting to do for my learners is to make sure it can identify a patient that deteriorates. And I feel like, where is the middle at? Because which hardware is the best? Are you going to tell me to get the Oculus, and are you going to create something that works with that infrastructure? Or are you going to tell me the Vive, and am I going to have problems with that? I think there's a gap between the hardware and the software management side of it.
Okay.
And my question to you is, do you run an Oculus or a Vive, or is it something that you guys created separately?
So none of what I'm presenting, what I'm presenting is projection based. Yeah. So Prism is currently unrelated to Oculus or Vive or any of the headsets. That said, I'd say 75% of what WorldViz does is VR based and happens in headsets. I'd say about 25% of our business happens with projection-based systems. Now, projection-based systems could be based on different types of software, right? We make a software called Vizor. That's our homegrown original 3D authoring toolkit, right? And that would allow you to connect your projection system to a headset or multiple headsets in different locations in the same location, have some type of coordinated task, but you would be the one authoring that 3D experience. So certainly we can talk to you about what those training applications are. A lot of our experience as a company is helping folks home grow their own VR applications. There is also, I'm trying to start conversations with these companies that are popping up that offer kind of cognitive task trainers in VR, where you're the team lead of some team and you're providing instruction and you're watching these avatars go about essentially completing the tasks that you say. So now we're going to do this, and then they do that, and then they say the next thing is all kind of voice controlled. But what I feel like is missing is the observer group, right? So what about the group of people that have to follow this along on one broken out view from their head-mounted display? And it's just like this dizzying whirlwind experience, and that's kind of ridiculous to me. What we can do if the software companies want to play nice, they give us those coordinates. We can pop you out into a perspective that gives you the whole room and let you watch them, race around the room, providing those types of feedback. So I've got a couple of meetings set up with developers where I'm trying to push that agenda of saying, hey, let us be the provider of a theater. Let us dual purpose our Prism Theater and say, make this a staging ground for an instructor, for a group of students to follow somebody along and see what they're doing during one of these task trainers. But that's like, that requires them playing nice with us and offering a bit of insight into their software. Yes, sir.
Saying that the same room can be used for multiple applications, the same
Right.
physical room. So if you're saying, you mentioned demonstrating the back of an ambulance, for instance.
Right.
So how do you reach for something that's close to you in the same physical room versus going to the other end of the OR?
That's an important question. I fully understand. When you're dealing with a Prism Theater, you're dealing with the space that you have, right? So we can put these rooms in a room that's 11 by 11 or 30 by 30 or anywhere in between, right? Or even larger if you had a larger room than that. But there's a conversation about what the most practical space is for the applications that you're going to want to train. And in the case of an ambulance, so say you had a typical room, which is probably around 12 or 13 feet by the same, okay? What you would be doing is essentially blowing up that really small space onto these screens that are further away, just as you described. So you wouldn't be necessarily working in the confined, 4-foot high real space of the back of an ambulance. But what you would be able to do is learn the landmarks and learn the orientation of where things are located in that space, right? Because what you can't do in an ambulance is take 10 people into an ambulance at one time, right? So what you could do is blow that image up, because the only way you can do it. It's going to be oversized. It's not going to look to scale, but it is going to offer you the opportunity to say, this is where things are located. This is where you'll find this. This is how you maneuver through the ambulance, even though this is a blown up version. So it is not a substitute for being in a real ambulance, but it offers a unique way to show the orientation, to do a vehicle orientation without having to be, having to try to fit many people in one ambulance. Does that make sense?
Yes. So if the scale is not an issue, can it be done on, let's say you take this size screen and put one on either side and create a U shape, can be applied to a 3-screen situation?
Yeah. Technically,
so you can fit
one person.
6 spots of those 3-screen things into one room.
Yeah, but I don't think you're going to find that that's like a cost prohibitive. If it's a space prohibitive problem, then certainly we'll work with you with 3, 60-inch or 70-inch screens. Sure, technology doesn't care about the size of your screens or even the orientation. Really, you can have 2, 3, 4 screens. Our software will work in a one-sided room to 4 sides, right? So that's not an issue. The question is, how practical is it, right? Like, would you have a training benefit from being surrounded by 3 of this size screen? The angle that you'd be able to see is now going to be reduced by the aspect ratio and kind of resolution of these screens. So maybe you'll have better resolution because you're shrinking down, say, a 4K video or 6K video to the size of a 1920 by 1280. But I think you're going to be limited in your field of view and certainly in your movement, right? now you can't bring a training mannequin inside this space because there's just not physically enough room for the two of you. So again, it's not intended to be the focal point. It's intended to be the background to your training. But certainly you can. If that was your interest, I'd help. I'd work with you.
Any other questions at all? Erica, do we have any online questions?
We do not have any online questions.
No questions online, sir. Bye. So we're going to go ahead and get started with Dr. Rossler's presentation, and then afterwards, then we'll get the food. The food should be here by then. So it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Rossler. She agreed to come and share with us. I'm going to give you a bottle of water, ma'am, just in case you need it. There you go. Dr. Rossler is an associate professor at Baylor University, Louise Harrington School of Nursing. And I just made her acquaintance this morning, well, by email, right? So, and then made her acquaintance this morning, for sure. Her expertise with academia incorporates simulation-based education technology and methodologies to create dynamic teaching learning experiences for future healthcare professionals. Her current research includes comparing virtual screen-based and human patient simulation to transition newly licensed nurses, incorporating telehealth into the curriculum to teach empathetic communication skills, and exploring the use of immersive virtual reality simulation on medication administration safety. All things that are quite important and things that we've been learning about lately, as a matter of fact, with some recent presentations. She holds the distinction of being selected as a 2016-2017 International Nursing Association for Clinical Simulation and Learning. You all know that as what? INACSL, right? So she was a research fellow for 2016-2017, and she holds the CHSE. I would say CHSE certification, so I'm just going to go ahead and say it that way. Offered by the Society for Simulation in Healthcare. Kelly, thank you for being here. We really appreciate you.
And I'll let you turn me
Oh,
on.
yeah, that's right. We got
No funny business. I'm coming to life.
There we go.
Here
You're
we
live.
go. Okay. Hey, thanks so much for having me. And I'm gonna, does this stay here? Okay. I don't want to damage it. No, you're good with it. There we go. So again, welcome to Spot. This is my first meeting here because I used to teach every, do I need to stay in somewhere? Teach every Thursdays and Fridays during this time frame. So this is delightful to get to see y'all and network and have that opportunity. And when I was approached, really looking at the new healthcare standards that have been revised, and I know y'all are familiar with they used to be the INACSL standards of best practice. And in this year was the new reveal of the new name. And we're really looking at, with Dr. Carden Egdren and her leadership and the whole board at INACSL, is looking at that healthcare spectrum. So the name changed as well to the healthcare simulation standards of best practice. And what does that look like? How many of y'all have kind of shout out, what's your favorite standard that you use right now? If you use the standards within your program. Favorite one? Pre-briefing, okay, cool. Sim design is a go-to, okay. I like the Sim IPE one because I do a lot of research and all with IPE focus as well. So no matter where you are within the standards, they all align together, they reinforce, one will expand on another. So I'm excited to introduce some of them to you today. It did work. All right.
Sorry about that. Oh, because it's on the sharing, I bet we have to use a mouse.
Oh,
Let's see.
I can do that.
Maybe.
Do I just hit enter?
There we go.
Okay, just enter. Okay. We tested it. It worked before, but no. Okay, so there we go. So I'd like to introduce the INACSL committee members that I wouldn't be here without them. We are a family now that have worked together in our chair, Dr. Penny Watts, who's the overarching coordinator of all of us. And it's just been a fun joy to work on the standards committee. I started first off in INACSL looking at the research committee and then came over and joined the standards committee. And when we started looking at the revisions, we started back in 2018-19. Okay, so we actually hired a medical librarian, and Jean Hillier, who actually happened to be from Baylor University, she had retired and had lots of time to assist us. So you can imagine going through the literature review from 2016, which was the last iteration of the standards, up to 2021. Some of the standards like the SIM IPE was out, and the SIM operations were all unfolding and also occurring, and were published, and you were aware of those. But at the same time, how do we now put this new standard into place? What does that look like? So our team is really represented of colleagues from different disciplines in healthcare as well. And so we had a great, strong representation from everybody. So here's our core team. And then we also went into, and you're going to see coming up, you have Dr. Brown, who's going to be talking about debriefing. And she actually was part of our team for the SIM IPE and some others as well. So I think it's pretty cool that you will continuing on with that debriefing side eventually. Oh, sorry, y'all.
There we go.
Okay. I'm just going to leave it here. All right. So when we think about the standards also, these are living documents. Within INAXL, they're looking at how do we look at a revision when the science was changing? Well, what was happening when in 2018 through 2019 and then 2020, when we were working on the standards, we all had to halt. Everybody did in our community. And we really needed to focus on and taking time to say, well, now we need to go back to the literature because new information was coming out and unfolding within healthcare that related to these standards. But at some point in time, we had to say we have to end because we have to bring out these new standards and have those revisions. And when we looked at making those revisions, some of the information that informed those were not only straight from the scoping reviews, scientific meta-analyses that we conducted, but also from the members of INAXL providing us with direction of where we'd like to head. And it's interesting, great topic today was on the virtual realm, because there has been a call from the healthcare professions groups. We see it in society, in learning, for virtual platforms. How about an independent virtual standard that's standalone by itself? And when we looked at that, particularly with where the research was showing, the literature hasn't taken us there. And so for now, what we're doing is that particular is still under a modality. And when we talk about the actual new things that are happening within healthcare, these living documents help you thread through that. And you kind of think through and say, well, no matter the modality or what I'm using, these standards will all apply for you. So when we think about, let me do this. What I did was just put the new Symfographs. These are free to y'all from the INAXL website, and you can right click them and download them and put them up, or you can order larger ones. And here, some of the things that I put on the board is just strictly the new information. And so the new information, when we're thinking about the debriefing process, I think when we were talking earlier, when Bryce was speaking, it's about that debriefing. What's so inherent in that? We know there's thousands of literature, articles, research studies designed to look at how do we do debriefing? What does that look like? But when we look to the literature too, that is also evolving. And as we were looking at the literature and debriefing was evolving, wait a minute, what about the pre-brief? Right? So we have so many opportunities where how do we introduce our learners, our participants regarding our education systems? If you have even sponsors, stakeholders coming in to see your labs, if you hold a simulation session, how do you prepare them for that? And so part of that was a takeaway to say we debrief, we have that reflective thought processes, but what about that pre-briefing? And so we'll talk about that in a bit, but everything needs to be planned and incorporated. It can't be off the fly. We need to make sure that we are all working with creating a guide so that it has the learner or the learner's outcomes, goals, objectives in the forefront. When we think about the debriefing itself, it also needs to be constructed very thoughtfully in the design process. So it can't be a standalone using a debriefing guide. And it depends on your level of learner as well, and your outcomes and your goals. So how many of y'all, what kind of formal debriefing processes do you all use within your facilities? If you want to shout out or name a few that you like to use. Okay, pearls. Yeah, pearls.
DML.
Okay.
DML.
Yep. So debriefing for meaningful learning as well. What else? There are Dash. Yeah. So everybody's familiar with different types, and we still have many times. So I'm kind of on the side gig, not really volunteering with the Society for Simulation in Healthcare for the certification, CHSC preparedness blueprints. And where there's an influx, it's just beautiful to see how they grow the map of certification from CHSOS into CHSE, advanced as well. And it's coalescing of saying, I'm a novice, I need to start somewhere. And I really might focus on, some of the participants are great to share, or learners who come into those certification programs saying, I'm new, they told me I need to do this, or I don't know where to begin, where do I have? But I do know that at the end, I want it all to come together. So it might be debriefing where you start, wherever your program is, and it all begins with kind of that needs assessment and self-evaluation of your program. At any point in time, these are our aspirational goals, right? We like to have the standards to aspire to. You might highlight one section of a standard that really resonates with your team and things that you are working on, goals and objectives for your program. At the same time, when you think about it, we also have to have debriefing for us, right? So how many of y'all debrief after sim and you have the meeting, or do you go home, hey, it's 5 o'clock, I'm out of here? And you have to have that pause moment, right? We have pauses in clinical practice. We have events that occur. We have faculty who will be simulationists and facilitators for 8-9 hours. How many times do you do that scenario when you're almost in the method acting? And God bless our standardized patients as well, and our embedded participants. So what does that look like? What if we have faculty member who comes in and volunteers for the day because we don't have anybody to stand in? How do we help debrief as well? So you're going to see that information in there. So it really is all about planning, and got it right, planning and structures so that we can be thoughtful. So you start from the end sometimes and work your way back to the beginning. And that's always something to kind of think about. Here we also have the evaluation of learning performance. When we think of evaluation learning, I just kind of went down the INAXA website, they have an alpha order, so that's how we're doing it here. When we think of evaluation learning, is it formative, summative, or high stakes? So what kind of formative for the learners are you all doing within your facilities? What kind of evaluation methods are you using? Do you have clinical faculty there, or you might have check sheets with your nurses, clinical competencies, things of that nature? So something that's new with the revisions, you're going to see more and more language about reliability and validity. What instruments, what tools are you using? If it's homegrown, test it out. What's reliable out there? You know that the repositories, so when I started in 2004-05 in simulation, that the NLN, sim design, those instruments were just coming out and everybody's like, yeah, thank you, right? So we still see those resonated through, and those are valid, they've been used, and we see new ones coming out. But what about evaluation of not only the learner, but what about of your faculty and your team? So something that I'm proud of our team too is having that peer review process where it does kind of be, oh, they're going to evaluate me, I'm going to, not do well today, or it's not a punitive thing, it's a enhancement of, if I'm evaluating my program, where are our goals, where are we headed, what are we doing? And this comes to mind where if we're doing summative for the learners, and you kind of think of too of your program. So have a mindset of that 360-degree, if you will, vision of the learners come in here and we want them to be evaluated. We need to be on track that everything follows through with our core goals and our objectives for those simulation scenarios. But if it's formative, make it formative. Don't turn it into a summative already where it's a hey, the program is ended and this is your way that we're going to monitor that you know how to be safe with medication administration or suturing, things of that nature. Communication behaviors. Maybe you have a product or a new information or product that you're testing in the hospital setting, and you might want to try it out in a simulated environment. That might be a formative time, and summative is later when we do our yearly, hospital training and things. High stakes testing. You remember back in, I want to say like 2006, 7, 8, the huge forums at the conferences were, should we do high stakes testing? What does it look like? It's been in the medical side. It was newer to nursing than it was medicine. So even from other healthcare professions, respiratory, OT, PT, speech, all of that, it's ever evolving. So make sure that you have identify your evaluation plan. Another item here, facilitator skills. Many times, you guys may have great joyous moments where you are the person who was looking under the hood of the simulator, doing the mechanical, doing the Wizard of Oz. I still have to talk about that because we're there. We were the voice of the mannequin. Let me run here. Let me run cameras. At the same time, how was I facilitating if I was doing all of those things? What was my training? What was the education? A lot of it was ways of knowing was trial and error, right? Or we mimic, and then we have mentor programs. So when you think about your developing facilitator skills, this is a huge one to really reflect on, because if you're building your program, you're changing your program, you want to be able to have that mentored structured program where you provide that educational opportunities, and it's a way to collaborate and share. And that evaluation piece comes in too, because that evaluation piece provides you a tool as well to have those crucial conversations to discuss about how can we further develop you and your interest. Sometimes we'll have learners come in, or faculty, or even in a hospital area where I worked and we did simulation. Hey, I got 20 hours here. They sent me over here to help. Ooh, wow. Okay. So how do you help? And it might be like, if I were a nurse, I'm going to go from the nursing perspective, and came to help for the day in a unit that needed an extra assistant. I need that orientation. I need to have that direction. So this really gives you that skills, knowledge, attitude as well, to be able to be that facilitator. And you need to be aware of theory-based simulations and diversity. We need to be aware of how our culture, diversity and inclusion is included within simulation, and that we follow those ethical procedures throughout all of our learners to make sure we do create that psychological and physical safe environment. So outcome objectives, again, sometimes this might be Groundhog Day, because no matter of the objective that you see or outcomes, you're going to see a piece in the criterion of the standards that outlines things and always refers you back to other standard pieces. One of those core pieces would be that sim design that we'll talk about at the end, because it all captures every component. But here with the learner outcomes, they have to be measurable. That was one thing we've identified is, over and over again, literature has come out to say we need those reliable, valid measurements. Not only psychometric instruments, but how is it measured within your facility? And when you think about it, how about scaffolding that knowledge? So look at those SMART goals. What does that look like? How do you apply that when you're thinking about your outcomes and objectives? And when you tie it all in, and if you have those SMART goals, that becomes your return on investment within your programs. When you go talk to your teams, your stakeholders, your board of administrators, things of that nature, to say, this is what we're doing, this is how we're doing, these are how we met our objectives, not only for the program or for individuals. So there is that dyad that you have to kind of look at, that balance of, we have participants, we have our learners, we have our educators, we have our faculty, but what about the programmatic as well, to include those? So when we're thinking about the simulation-based experiences, the Society for Simulation in Healthcare Dictionary is a valuable tool to use. So they'll use simulation-based experiential learning. When we look at the sims, we want to make sure that we identify the appropriate modality and the fidelity. So we seek for realism, but if I go in and I create a scene, which I love, like trauma, I'm a trauma critical care nurse. Ooh, moulage, I'm doing my acting 101 and I've got all the makeup there. And the students are so like, wow, look at this. They're so immersed in the wounds that they don't see the big picture, right? We've overshadowed the important. We didn't stay in the line what we intended to do or create. And the modality, over and over again, can you have that haptic arm? I mean, y'all, I'm a day where we learned with the oranges, right? Where we did the injections and all that on those pieces. And when now we have so many modalities that we want to use, it needs to be really appropriate for that objective and that learner. And that is that not only realism, but how the fidelity, what do we need to do to make sure that it meets the goals and the objectives for that? And then also guidelines for facilitation. How many of y'all using like a notebook or guidelines or have policies, procedures in your for facilitators to help them? Okay, great. So a part of that too, if you have industry standard types of scenarios, simulations that you're using, those are beautiful ways to start orienting your team members and looking. They always have outcome and objectives, but at the same time, they put them in a way that you can kind of understand, and they provide a guideline. So when you're thinking about outcomes and objectives, they should all include that information. What a beautiful thing, operations. When operations specialists came on, again, that takes that who I love to go and look and set up the mannequin and see what's happening and do the blood and the arms. But the operations and the computer, when we created our own scenarios, we still can create those. But at the same time, how does it come all together and it coalesces? We're a collaborative team. We're collaborative members who are able to work together to create these awesome experiences for our learners. And when we see operations, a strategic plan, start thinking about if you have just, this is our goal, this is where we want to be. Let's start planning. Who are our stakeholders? Who do we need to identify? Who do we invite to our party, right? Who do we come and visit and tour? Some of the things that when I was working in a hospital in Georgia, we really wanted to expand and gain money to have a collaborative interprofessional College of Health Professions lab. And so what we did was I invited myself to the team and the dean of the couple of the universities and the local hospitals and all the stakeholders, board members are like, what are you doing here? You're faculty. I'm like, no, wait a minute. Okay. SIM, we're talking about SIM, right? And let's make a plan. So the plan was just to do for them was like local things. I'm like, no, let's take it to Atlanta and talk to our senators, legislators. And we did that. We created a whole day and we're in the middle of the loggia and it was fun. Everybody worked together, but we had to kind of blow up and think out of the box and put those vision boards, if you will, out there for that. But we need that, provide the right personnel in the right spaces, right? So how can we support everybody with that expertise? We do have varying levels of expertise. So be mindful too, that we need to make sure that we are cognizant of that. And we have a mentor program, or we have a way to make sure that professional development is continuing. We also look at managing space and equipment. We had a great presentation here that looked at a way that you can optimize the presence of different types of environments by lighting up a room, right? I think I used to, when I volunteered at a junior league here, was at the Perot Center now, but before that it was at Fair Park, where you go to the IMAX theater. How many of y'all been there for, Fair Day? So I got to be behind the scenes, cleaning off the big screen. That it was that immersive environment, right? We used to go and like, wow, look at the stars, look at this, what's happening. And so what a beautiful way to have that environment around you. Do we need that space? What about our equipment? How about when the mannequins, when we first got them and they ran off of generators? And we had those big clunky things we had to hide behind, and they're going, making different sounds. So what are our resources? What is happening? We looked about systems integration. We had a great question in the audience earlier about, hey, this doesn't talk, communication. How do our systems talk? I first learned in a brick building Wi-Fi didn't work in the brick building. So my high-tech simulator that, oh, I've got it, it's great. This is gonna, we'd have to go out to the window, open it up, and somebody hang out there to get Wi-Fi for it to work. Okay, so those things I'm thinking of, wow, we thought about that. It worked when they demoed, but what happened? So policies and procedures. How many of y'all would like to share what are some policy procedure items that were really important for you to put into your operations day to day?
Timelines.
Timelines. Okay, cool. So it helps you stay kind of on track and also helps you think for future too, not only in the minute for what you're doing, but throughout the day, but planning in the future. Awesome.
For your like faculty, their timelines and their deadlines of getting back.
Yes. Okay, so timeline of, hey, this is due now, like you're coming next week. We also want to see one of the core things with sim design is to have that not only pre-briefing, but the test pilot of the scenario, right? How much time do we have? That takes time to be built in, and it's necessary. I equate that sometimes where we're in a hospital environment and the patient has gone home and we need time to then reset. We need to clean the room in the hospital environment. We're resetting the stage. We're putting everything right. We need that time, but somebody else who might not see from administration or not, they all have buy-in, but you have to outline it and embed that time in. So it's throughput. So then if you have that learner satisfaction, stress, things of that nature, if you have that timeline laid out, variables will happen and you can't always predict, but having that provides that policy for everybody now sets the stage and you have that, oh, I know I need to get to this to you by then, or it can't just be, hey, we're coming tomorrow, kind of like it used to be when we would invite yeah, come tomorrow, come see. Now we're like, wait a minute, we have no vacancy, but we welcome you, right? So part of it is, and then we can't minimize also resources, financial resources. I have pulled out mannequins who were being thrown away, that I'm like, these can be our out on the lawn victims or things. So I always keep items like that. But again, I have to go back, well, this is the right modality for what we're doing. So professional development, this is huge. A part of professional development and professional integrity. When we all get together on our calls, the INACSL Standards Committee, we're like, what's your favorite, standard happening right now? And it's interesting because a lot of us has migrated to that professional integrity, kind of rebalancing out and basis for looking at what not only for ethical and things, but professional development. How do those all tie together? So here we want to make sure that we look at educational needs assessment and an analysis. So you're always doing that environmental scan. What does it look like? What are we doing? And you can see how these all stack upon one another and complement one another with what they do. But individually, each of the standards have their own specific criterion. Obviously, it's just not these three, but when it's you further delve into the criterion of there, highlight those areas or identify where, let's start here. If we don't have a development plan, what would one look like and what area could we begin? We also want to look at that formative and summative plan again. So it goes back to strategic planning, thinking, how long will it take? Is it a conference, send into a conference? Is it networking? Is it specific competency-based yearly things that happen? What works within your program? It's not one size fits all. Everybody has their own unique areas, and you also have unique areas for growth. So think about not only the novice to expert model, but how can we make sure we capture everybody so that they want to have joy in their workplace. They also get fulfilled, but there's a lot of times developmental things can occur. And just today, seeing you all here is a development in itself to be able to come and spend the time. Okay, so here's the professional development leads into professional integrity. And so if you haven't, this is a new one that really focuses on having those healthcare simulation ethical standards that were published by the Society for Simulation in Healthcare. So those were uniquely embedded within, and we felt strongly the committee that Farah and her team that worked on this was like, we need to really have this as an inclusion. We need to include every item here. And what I've done is just kind of looked at not only uphold the honor of it, but following the standards, right? Looking at the standards and what are your practices within your own professions. So we don't want to have these supersede what it is your scope of practice, but what are policies and procedures that you can blend in within the code of ethics, do no harm, beneficence, things of that nature that we all practice every day. So again, that safe learning environment, we have heard it kind of over since the dawn of time, but sometimes we can forget, right? We can be so desensitized sometimes to our environment that we need to make sure we have that paramount on our list, that we're creating that safe environmental scan for our learners and our participants as well. So inclusion, respect, dignity for all. And I'm really excited about the new initiatives, things happening within, I know, nursing realm, medical realm, and education itself. That's really speaking to, well, let's give us some action items too that we can follow if this is an area where we need for growth. What does that look like? So I think we have been doing this, but it's a paramount now. Let's have it within the standard, which I think is great because it places that emphasis that would need to be there. And then remember confidentiality. We used to always use the Vegas term, right? What stays there? It's morphed, it's changed. We have different items. Now we have, what about safety with video, audio, video? What do? We blur out the faces. How long are we going to maintain our records? What's going to happen? If we have high stakes testings or you're in medical discipline and you have surgeons or medical students coming in for procedures, how long is that on their file? What are the policies and procedures that you have for enacting those? So those all coalesce together, but you need to have that professional integrity where you're not, hey, look, let's see, so-and-so did, right? Let's have those boundaries and make sure that we are professional. So this is kind of sideways. I love this. So Donna McDermott, she's fabulous, and her whole team looking at, and this is what she loves to talk about, is pre-briefing as well as preparation and briefing. So the pre-brief really looks at establishing the criteria of different things. We have a universal criteria that's set in there. There's also the preparation and the briefing criteria. So they were very thoughtful of planning out those three distinct stages and what those look like. And part of that is really being knowledgeable about the scenario. Okay, be prepared. Maybe in your center and in your education, you have maybe 4 or 5 go-to scenarios that you use over and over. And then you said, yeah, I'm bored today with that. I'm going to go ahead and add this or do this to it. Well, wait a minute. So that goes against the tenets of that we've already said about outcomes, objectives, preparedness, making sure everybody's on track. Pre-briefing is developed according to your objectives as well. And then we also look at that knowledge of that environment, creating that the simulationist has that way to be able to communicate and collaborate with the learner too. So kind of being on that same level. When we think of preparation, make sure all the materials are there to prepare. That I know we're much more organized, I think, these days with having special stations and closets and resources that are there for us rather than trying to identify supplies, which is the industry has finally caught up to us, right, in the simulationists, so that they're developing and we're being able to use these equipment and things that help us. We want to what? Help those learners succeed. So when we go into that preparation mode, we want them to know, hey, come prepared. These are the things I anticipate for you today. So there's no hidden messages, no tearing, crying, upset. There's already anxiety and stress depending on if it's formative, summative, or high stakes, right? We want to be enablers and make sure that they are successful. And what they do, and they need to have plenty of time to not just here's what you're doing today, an hour ahead, make the information available to that learner for preparation. And then briefing, you kind of end up going, again, psychological safety, setting up the environment so that it is created so that they understand what the expectations are, as well as no unexpected things, but things could happen. And if things happen, these are how we do it here. These are our policies, procedures, these are actions that we may take, okay? All right. So IPE, this is my love. So this, myself and looking at Margie Malloy from Duke University, Nina Xavier as well, who's MD, and we're looking at Michelle Brown, who worked on this, and Matt, who also worked on this with us. And so it's a global way to all work together collaboratively. And when we think about SIM IPE, this one really has basic criteria, conducting, looking at SIM IPE on theory. And I tell you, when we did the research from this, the strongest point from simulation perspective for IPE is the learning theories. There are more experiential learning theories that are out there from programs like Team Steps. If you look at IHI Open School chapters, if you look at theories that have been around for quite some time, Kolb's experiential learning theory, social cognitive theory, look at some theories and models of framework for IPE. Also a great resource is IPEC. I do know that that interprofessional collaborative group is redoing those again, those standards. I'm not sure when they'll be out, but actively they're working on those. And within that toolbox are those old, like the Ripples scale, collaborative communication scales. There's so many types of instruments that you can collect. So we're missing that piece on IPE of really valid psychometric tools and the use of theory. So that's the main takeaway for the SIM IPE. Sim design, again, not too many changes with sim design, except really focusing on that fidelity side, making sure that you design is in with what consultants. We used to possibly be the experts on all things sim when we started. We're not. So who are your consultants that you can go to? Who are those folks in your education departments, in your units that you're working at with your medical, or if you're in the hospital setting or academia setting, or any other, even the high school, STEM departments, they're using simulation for their areas. We want that centered approach, looking at constructive feedback, analysis, make sure everything's measurable, your SMART goals. So if you're new, a novice, or growing your program, sim design has always been the one to kind of go to be able to provide that context and support. The one takeaway too, I think, with the sim design is pilot testing your scenarios, right? Making sure some machinery may go wrong, this or that, or could happen. But at the same time, how do we act? How do we respond? How do we enable the learners and kind of go from there? And the sim design helps you identify all those avenues. The glossary. So the sim glossary, really reduced. When you're looking at the standards, the terms used in the standards are there to support the standards. We also want to encourage you to look at the Society for Simulation and Healthcare Dictionary, because we align the terminology very thoughtfully for that. And so I think, thank Dr. Margie Malloy and her team. I was part of that too, was really going through that tons of language in the existing standards to kind of see what's out there, and then coalescing those together with the new definitions. So some of that you're going to see out, the old participant is focused on learner. You'll see that language change. Simulationist has evolved in terminology as well, like operationalist. And then we also have, instead of virtual reality, everything's more technology enhanced. So what is it that is technology, so that we have those clear defined definitions? All right, and I didn't put tons of references. You guys can find the websites. I feel confident. And hey, so that was a quick nutshell trying to get done so we could go, but I appreciate y'all's time. And if you reach out to any of the committee members that you see, myself, whoever, and we'd be happy to help you and guide you through that. But I'm just so proud of the documents that we have and that they're able to share to y'all nationally, locally, internationally. So it's great. So thank you. Any questions?
Any questions for Dr. Rossler?
Can we get a copy of the presentation?
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah. And I think it's on the Zoom. Do you all record
Yeah,
it?
it's being recorded as
Yeah.
well, and it'll be available when our magician back there. I mean, our very talented magician back there takes care of all that stuff. So when she gets to be able to download it and so on, we will have it available on our website and Facebook page as well.
Perfect.
I hope I didn't misspeak. Did I, magician? Will it be on the Facebook page?
This is probably gonna be a really large file, so you can record for 2 hours. But you'll get the link.
Yeah, there you go. Good, good.
Hopefully, everybody was fine with me calling out their names.
Right.
I'll let my team, my pals know. Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Rossler. That really was awesome. I appreciate it. We have lunch out there from what I hear. Give me just a second. We'll wrap up in here. Give me just a minute. And there we go. Yes, indeed. Good. Hey, why didn't that work? Crystal, I need you.
We also have a sign-in sheet that we're gonna have you guys sign in, so we can capture you all and have your emails. And it's gonna be a QR code that our team.
There's some green things out here. It's just a QR code. If you'll sign in on that, just so we know, we want to know everybody that was here today. I do apologize. We actually didn't have spot built in. So if you just choose like other for what you attended, we know that everybody here today was for spot.
Right on. Let's go back one slide.
Yeah, sure, next one.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're just gonna share.
So very
next one.
quickly,
Share
I know we're at noon, maybe a little bit after. We've had two fantastic presentations today. Thank you so much, Bryce and Kelly, because it was fantastic information. And then in July, we'll have a virtual spot meeting. We don't have the exact date nailed down yet, I don't believe, but Michelle Brown from University of Alabama, Birmingham will be speaking virtually via Zoom about debriefing. And because, we've all experienced debriefing where it went fantastic and then sometimes where it doesn't. I teach in a nurse anesthesia program at Texas Wesleyan, and every year I have a student or two who truly they feel like they've been traumatized by a difficult debriefing. So that's where that meeting came from. So we're going to have her presenting in July. We again want to thank Kelly, thank Bryce for being here. Thank you, Bryce, for lunch as well. Earlier I didn't say it, but thank you, UT Southwestern, for hosting us and providing the water and the coffee and really all of the work that y'all have done. I feel like we know many of you already because Crystal has talked about you and included us on the emails to you. So thank you, Kevin and Ian and Debbie and Shola, who's behind the scenes, and Mary, who was up here as well. So thank you, all of you. I know I missed somebody. Thank you guys for attending, both online and here in person. Again, our next meeting will be virtually in July, but it'll be great to have you guys. We do have a spot meeting planning survey that's still available, I believe. And then the GoFundMe QR code for the survey. Just if you are interested in us coming up with topics, if you're interested in speaking, please let us know. We have a team of 5 and we're always interested in what you have to share. So if you have something that's on your heart and you want to share it to the group, whether it's virtually or in person, please do let us know because that's valuable to us for planning our future meetings. Again, here's our email, our website, the Facebook page, and LinkedIn pages as well. Please, if you're not following us already, do. We'll have some updates posted probably on the Facebook page or by email about future meetings, of course, as well as the progress of our nonprofit organization status. And I think that's our last slide.